Welcome to the King's Indian attack for black. This is one of the most fun, imbalanced openings in all of chess. Both sides build up to a massive attack for 20 moves, then all hell lets loose with sacrifices and counterplay on both sides of the board. We'll see what happens when white goes for a fast plan of queenside expansion and a slower plan of piece development. Now white's gone for a more passive Colle system setup with e3 rather than e4. This doesn't control the centre and locks in black's dark square bishop. So we'll want to advance in the centre ourselves with moves like knight bd7, rook e8 and prepare e5. We then want to play e4 ourselves, which will block the centre, give us a chance to build up a kingside attack. So white will go c4, rook e8, knight c3, both sides develop, knight bd7, queen c2 and e5. White does not want to capture here because we'll recapture with the pawn. We'll still be threatening e4, opening up our dark square bishop. We'll be playing knight c5 and a5 when our pieces coordinate well and we're quite active. So white plays rook d1 instead, get the rook on the same file as the queen, and we go e4, locking the centre. This is key move and it's stage 1 of our plan. This gains time on the knight, so knight d2 and queen e7. Black cannot win this pawn because we're protecting it as many times as it's attacked. This will remain true even as we build up our attack because we'll be playing h5, knight f8, bishop f5, bring the rooks to defensive squares and then advance on the king side. White will meanwhile be advancing on the queen side with b4, a4, push all the pawns, trying to get a pawn to a6, and then once we've played b6, he'll try and play c5, so that's many moves away. White goes b4, we execute our plan with knight f8, both sides pretty much play independently to be honest. a4 and h5. Now long term, we want to bring a knight to h7 then g5. Another plan we can consider is knight h7 and then zip the g pawn down the board. H pawn can come to h4 and then we can open up the king side. So white goes a5. The best plan is to advance as fast as possible on the queen side. If white dilly-dallies too much with moves like bishop b2, bishop a3, and developing rooks, then that will just give us more tempi for our attack. White goes a5, knight 8 h7, bishop b2 and bishop f5. Now we've executed stage 2 of our plan. Our pieces are on the correct squares. Memorize this setup because you'll always be wanting to reach it when you go for this kingside attack. White continues with b5. Again, our attack is more potent because we're going for the king. White's going for this queen side where we almost have no pieces. We go knight g5 here. Now, long term, we want to play h4, induce white to play h3, and then we can contemplate a sacrifice on h3. This is very scary for white to face. His king's all alone, and if he makes one slip, we'll be delivering checkmate. White goes a6, b6. Now, it's a good time to make one defensive move on the queen side. That's my rule of thumb. When you're defending, make one defensive move in amongst your attack in order to just shore up your defences and slow the opponent down. Now c5 is actually quite hard to achieve for white and it's not clear if he'd even want to play it. He could play it here, we'd capture, and then our bishop would be unleashed along diagonal. We'd be in as good a position as white is to bring rooks to the d file and dominate the centre. Meanwhile our attack will rage. So white will build up a bit more slowly with moves like rook dc1 and knight a4 potentially. He can also bring his queen back to defend with queen d1 and f1. So it's some high-level prophylactic play that white's going to have to go in for. It's good for him if he knows it, but in faster time controls, playing moves like this is quite difficult. So the best move for white is rook dc1. He's building up that c5 move. The rook's not doing anything on the d file anymore. We go queen d7, an important move because we know white's going to play h3. We want as much pressure on that h3 pawn as possible so we can get our queen into the attack. We might be capturing on h3 and then bringing the queen to f5 and g5. So white goes queen d1, a very good move. Now let's see what happens if white plays blindly on the queen side. If he goes knight a4, we'll play knight f3 check, a fantastic move. Now the problem with pawn takes is we'll recapture and our bishop will be hitting the queen, we'll be hitting the bishop. This pawn will be very dangerous because if the queen ever gets in, it'll just be game over. So white's forced to capture with the bishop, we recapture with the pawn and queen d1. Now if we take on g2, White's going to have to keep this pawn as an umbrella pawn. If he captures, it's just too dangerous because we'll play bishop h3 check and all our pieces will flow into the kingside. So instead he'll have to play moves like knight c3. We can bring our h pawn to h3 and, well, continue with the attack or just win the endgame. So this knight f3 check is very powerful. If white goes queen d1, boring move, stopping us sacrificing and bringing his queen out of the attack, we'll go for a slow build up with either h4 or we can play bishop h6. Now this is good because white is going to want to get rid of our central pawn with f3. We need as much pressure on this e3 pawn as possible so we're ready to capture and take over the centre. Now white has got some bizarre looking plans. The computer says rook c2, rook ac1 is good. He wants to play knight d5 and then, because this knight's hanging, we're going to have to recapture, pawn takes, and then this double pawn structure is good for white because he can put pressure on the c pawn. But really it's a slow build up and there's nothing for us to worry about. So rook c2, we go h4, white's forced to play h3. Now if he plays knight d5 we get a better position because we recapture and go rook ac8. White's never capturing this pawn. The queen side's so blocked that he's got no other way to attack. So we'd build up. We can even contemplate going back to h7, g5, g4, g3. Sacrificing a pawn on the king side is always good because our bishop has this pressure on e3. So yeah, if white goes h3, we can even capture on h3. Now this is a bit better for white objectively, but can your opponent defend this? G takes h3, knight takes h3. Now we're hitting this pawn, so white has to go king g2. If he goes king f1, it'll be game over pretty quickly because we'll go queen f5 hitting this pawn. So the king has to come forward into the open, queen f5 threatening this pawn. Now the only move that gives white an advantage is queen f1. Now just look how ugly this side is. I don't care that we're down a pawn here. We can go g5, our plan is g4, bring the knight back, drive the king back and play knight f3. So a great kingside attack. Your opponent will be very scared if you get this on the board. Even if it says it's better for white, it could be over in an instant if he makes one inaccuracy. Now let's go back to this position and see a slightly slower plan from white. We've just played queen e7, so b4, we go knight f8 and bishop b2. Now white here wants to go rook ac1, d5 and c5. This opens up his light squared bishop and his idea long term might be to play knight b5 and get knight to c7. We'll carry on our attack with h5, rook ac1, knight h7. Now here white goes d5. Now this does at first glance look quite good, but we have time to generate threats on the king side. One thing I would say do not do is don't play g5. We don't have time for this g4, h4 and h3. In an ideal world where we had 3 spare moves we'd play that, but it gives white time to play c5. Now if we continue with g4, he's going to be playing knight b5, he's threatening pawn takes and knight with a fork. So we'd have to play rook d8 and after just some move like a4 or taking on d6, he's got the advantage. So we've got to keep white's queenside play under control with, well, a slower move you can play is a5. If he takes on a5, rook takes a5. This is similar to a King's Indian bayonet attack where we just break up white's queenside. Now it's going to be very hard for him to achieve c5. It's going to need additional preparing moves such as a4, bishop a3 to support this square. We can play b6 to slow it down as well or prevent it entirely. So a4, we go c5 ourselves, block up the queenside, force white to exchange everything off. So d takes, b takes, bishop a3 and c5. Now I like this for black. We can bring our bishop to c6, that's the best square for it. We can bring our other rook to the a file. The fact that we've played these moves with our knight is not really a detriment because if white plays knight d5, we'll capture and then bring our other knight to f6. So this is okay. If we're a bit more ambitious though, which we should be if we're playing this opening, we'll play h4. Now white can play h3 and then all we've really got is knight g5. White plays bishop f1 to prevent this sacrifice. Then the best we have is a5 and it's just an equal position, same as before. But if white goes for a bit more of a naive move and plays c5, we'll see what happens. We can go h3, what we wanted. Now say white goes g3, plausible move you might see. We go bishop f5, again with the idea of putting our bishop on the same line as the queen, supporting this pawn and going knight g5 to f3. White will play something like knight b3 or knight c4. We can go knight g5. Now, this plan of c takes, and knight b5 no longer works because we have the move rook e to c8. Now, this challenges the c file. Knight c7 no longer works because the knight will be pinned. So white might have to go queen b1, and then after knight f3 check, we've got our bishop battery down the two diagonals, and we're just winning. So let's say white plays a4, tries to build up as before, but he's too slow this time. We can go knight to g4. Our plan is to bring the knight round to f3. That way, when the bishop takes, we'll bring the other knight to f3. White's king will be completely dominated, even if we exchanged off all the pieces. With white's king in the corner like this, we just win in the endgame. So white goes, let's say he plays something like rook e1 for argument's sake. Then we have knight e5, knight d4, and for example, one idea we have is we can capture here and bring our rooks to the d file. This pawn's a bit tender. We're not worried about knight takes, pawn takes, because our e pawn is no longer isolated. So a very pleasant build up for black, and into the endgame we can slowly take over.